Hello! My name is not Iris, but you can just call me Iris. And I'm going to be talking astrology. Thanks to my fiance who was like, you should talk about astrology because when you talk about astrology, it's so fun. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I'll film you. And I was like, that makes it less weird. Thanks. So here I am. So what the is this? This is a natal chart. When we talk about astrology, we're always like, oh, I'm a Virgo or I'm an Aquarius, and you just talk about one thing. Actually, when you are born, when I say I'm a Virgo, that's only referring to where the sun is in relation to the earth. But when you read a natal chart, astrology is actually you reading where all the planets and asteroids are in relation to the earth at the time you were born. So how you calculate it is that you take your date and year of birth, your time of birth, and your location of birth. Because the way astrology is taken is that Earth is like in the center, and somebody draws an imaginary circle around the Earth, and then they just kind of pin where the planets were inside that imaginary circle. So if you live in Antarctica versus, is that Antarctica? Antarctica? Whatever. If you live in Antarctica, the way your circle will look is going to be different from where a person who lives in like Australia, because the way you're looking at the universe is just at a different angle. So it is important that you have a relatively accurate place of birth and date of birth. The time of birth is so preferred, but not necessary. The time of birth determines houses, which are these numbers on the side. But you can just do the chart reading without the numbers. Date of birth, year of birth, and place of birth will tell you about the signs and the planets' locations. And that is fine. It is very important you have the exact date of birth, year of birth, and place of birth. Because the planets are always moving, right? And the asteroids are always moving. If you took May 18th, 2025 versus May 18th, 1025, the planets are in very different places from that date versus today's date. It is very important that you have the date of birth, year of birth, and place of birth. This is an imaginary person. You can tell because they're not born yet. But yeah, so I just, a random city generator. The date is, I just chose the date that this video is going to be published on. And then I just chose a random time of day. So this imaginary person who may or may not be real, 12:37 p.m. is pretty specific. I've never really tried looking up the time frame for houses, which are the numbers, the black numbers on the border. If it's like 1 hour, half an hour, well, whatever. So with houses, these also correspond to phases of life, or more specifically as they're analyzed, areas of life. So these are really, when people talk about like love and relationships and like job and career, you really want to look at the houses. So the four most important houses are AC, which is first impressions, how you first perceive the world and how people first perceive you. DC, this is one everybody loves. Love, relationships, and romance. How this corresponds, this is actually the threshold where you go from being self-absorbed, there's a negative way of putting it, but being more concerned with your inner world and transitioning to being more concerned with your outer world. DC, which is the 7th house, is the first house where you're concerned with the world outside you. And so why that's about relationships and romance is because the world outside you starts with one person, one connection you make, which oftentimes is love. Great. So MC, which is the highest house, career. But it really means like when you're most public. Like where you really lay the groundwork for your own personal empire, which oftentimes is a career. So, for example, does Midheaven in Gemini very curious, very young-spirited, like loves pursuit of knowledge and things like that. I could associate with teacher. Gemini is a very childish energy, the twins, right? So I can also imagine to be a good teacher because they inspire curiosity in others and they like to cultivate curiosity in others. And this like collection of knowledge for knowledge's sake is also a huge thing with Gemini as well. So yeah, IC is family. This is because the idea of like this empire, right, is this huge public thing. And so the opposite of that is this personal empire, you know, like where, like who grounds you? Where do you, what is your home? What do you come home to? What is your foundation of self as opposed to the empire self, your highest, most public, most produced self as opposed to your basest self. So this is often associated with family. So Sagittarius, I see, which looking quite empty, this doesn't seem to be very important to you, is this idea of the family being kind of also in that vein of like pursuit of knowledge, but a little more philosophical, a little less flighty, more, there's more through line to it. But it's just, I don't know, yeah, it's just empty. What's kind of interesting is Sagittarius is represented by Jupiter, which is located in the Gemini, almost right on top of the midheaven. There's a conspiracy. But yeah, and it's so interesting because the first 6 houses are those young houses, the internal self, which are almost completely empty. But the young planets are really full. So there's a way in which like these like parts of your life aren't active, but you have to develop a sense of ego somewhere. The first house being this like your first impressions of the world and how the world perceives you, which is in Virgo. So very critical and analytical, open-minded, in a sort of, in that kind of same Gemini curiosity way. Other people also might see you as analytical, maybe even shy. For some Virgo energy, it could be a shyness, but it's also the willingness to sit back and observe, which often can be perceived as shy. That's the first house. And the Virgo energy is represented by Mercury, which is located over here. That's at Taurus Mercury, which is actually quite harmonious, isn't it? Because Virgo and Taurus are both earth signs, so just kind of like similar energy. And the second house, Libra, values creature comforts, which in the Libra sense, nothing brings you comfort like the arts and making sure everybody's happy. It's all about like, you know, balancing the scales, which in this case is probably just people, given what we just talked about with the kind of horoscopish thing before. And Venus is located over here. And then the third house, Scorpio. Third house is kind of like the childhood thing, where it's like, you know, we talk about the values, right? But you kind of want to expand upon that, and you challenge your values. The third house associated with toddlers. So the idea of like pushing boundaries to see like the things that you thought you liked. Do you really like them? Do you really not like them? You know, you just kind of like test the waters. Third house, which is Scorpio. So this is actually a very fun third house because Scorpio, you know, edgelords, right? So horrific toddler this person is. I mean, testing the boundaries. I mean, they're gonna jump off of so many tables. They're gonna stick their hands in fires. They're definitely the people who will stare, like very black cat energy. They will stare you down and do the thing you ask them not to do just to see your reaction. This is represented by Pluto. which is actually over here. Secondary representation is in Mars, which is over here. But there's like the conspiracy, do. Here it is. It's so active. It's a toddler thing happening here. 4th house, Sagittarius, I talked about it, represented by Jupiter up here in the midheaven. This is interesting about like what should be the inner world is actually very publicized. Your inner world only comes to life when you connect with other people, as opposed to connecting to yourself. When you're by yourself, there's something about it that, like, introspection is just perhaps not the most beneficial or interesting thing to this imaginary baby. They really, and that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be extroverted, but this person really finds a lot of growth by like just sheer socializing. I don't even know that they need to achieve anything, especially with this Aquarius energy. It doesn't even have to be about kind of like, completing a goal in a sort of like Machiavellian or ambitious way, but it's about like truly there's something that our friends made along the way, friendship for friendship's sake. I don't know, curiosity for curiosity's sake. There's something very like humanism about this chart. Now that I'm thinking about it. Capricorn, 5th house. 5th house is a fun house. This is kind of like the fun thing. Corresponds with Leo, by the way. So the idea of kind of like you're feeling yourself, you're expressing yourself, you're finding out what you value and what makes you feel valued. The most important thing about a 5th house that differentiates it from what I was talking about with the 2nd house is what makes you feel valued. In this Capricorn thing, it's about feeling useful. What makes you feel valued is to feel useful and to feel like you can be entrusted with responsibility. This is the kid who would love to be line leader. Capricorn is represented by Saturn, which is here. And then 6th house is kind of the hard work house, which is associated with Virgo, which I am. And the hard work house. So the idea is that after the 5th house, you've identified what makes you feel valued, which is being given responsibility, being able to take charge, and really being able to take care of each other. It's a very paternal energy. And the 6th house is like, cool, I've identified that. Now we should probably learn what that actually looks like in real life. And so in Aquarius, a lot of what that looks like in real life is about making yourself work with other people and just trying to build a good old community. Obviously, I've taken a shot every time I say the word community, promptly die. But yeah, and this is the first active house, which is right on the threshold of when we go to the external world houses. Yeah, this is this really fun energy of like the internal world is empty and you only learn about yourself, who you are on the inside by interacting with others. Like you are this very strong who you are is reflected in who you are with others situation happening here with this kid, and with this kid specifically because of the way the houses are laid out. And DC, which is that like romance and relationships house, is in Pisces. And I don't remember if you remember what I mentioned before about Pisces as the oldest sign is the most empathetic sign because they have walked a life of all the other signs before them. There's something interesting about DC in Pisces and the relationships that you want in others, that you want from others, is like somebody who's lived or can see from the eyes of anybody else. Because if your chart's energy is, I only know myself when I can see who I am when I am with others, then does it not make sense that the relationship you would want to seek in others on a personal level, one-to-one level, romantic, platonic, whatever, but a one-to-one level, is to be with somebody who to you seems like they can see anybody's point of view. Then it's kind of like you learn, it's almost like you get like 12 people in one. Wow, it's just so efficient. The AC-DC connection is very fun, where this is about the first impressions, right? So this is what you just put out into the world and how you see the world initially. And then this is in a way the opposite of that, which is what you want to see from others, and what you want others to see from you. The 7th house is associated with Libra, which is associated with Venus, and the idea of harmony and balance and justice, and how that Venus, Libra, harmony, justice, energy, and a threshold of like externalizing your world. The gist of it is that you come to a point where you have to be able to think about others and to find a way to make everybody get along. Because at the 7th house, you are acutely aware that other people have lives and that we all have to live together. And it's not just about you. It's not just about your personal circle. It's about everybody now. So that's that threshold with DC. And now it gets really active. 8th house. Oh, I forgot to mention also, when you have planets in a house, that also influences the house. So the moon is inside the 5th house. So we kind of go like this is the 1st house, 2, this is all 2, this is all 3, this is all 4, this is all 5. So the moon is in the 5th house, which is the house of fun, flings, what makes you feel valued. And what makes you feel valued is very tied to your emotional state and emotional well-being. So a lot of what makes you feel valued is also what makes you feel comfortable. So there's a lot of emotions tied to fun actually for you, which is kind of funny because a lot of having fun is about spending time with people. It's very sentimental actually. It's a very cute thing, which is very interesting because Aquarius is a very impersonal sort of sign because we're like on the precipice of ego death. Pisces is ego death. And so this is interesting like tension of like what makes me feel content, and what I mentioned that is kind of a sentimental placement, but at the same time it's about losing yourself. Losing yourself is a sentimental act. Cool, great, put that on my tombstone. So now we're in the 7th house. DC is 7 and got quite a few things in here, including Venus and North Node. I love North Node. So this is a very romantic person. This person just loves love for love's sake. This person is so hardcore. Knowledge for knowledge's sake, love for love's sake, everything for everything's sake. My God. So the Venus is 7th house in Aries. I mean, they really go gung-ho in their relationships. They're a ride or die, sure. And there's something actually very pure about this. If it was Mars in the 7th house, the bonds you build are very much all about action things. So you would just love, oh my God, Wiki Feet, who? It's all about just doing shit, right? It doesn't even have to be, like, you be the kind of people who like fish and you don't talk to each other. You just there. You go hiking, you don't talk to each other. Just like, but no, this person very much is like, no. When I'm with you, I want to be with you. And it doesn't have to mean like deep philosophical talks, but they really want to feel like they're connecting with you personally. Like it couldn't be anybody else in that moment. And then North Node. North Node is a calculation, I believe. It is not a planet. It is not an asteroid. It is a calculation. And what it basically means is that, like, this is the sign, house, the sign, and then whatever house it's in, that whose lesson you did not learn the most in your previous life. And so when people say, like, I'm a Virgo, but I relate so much more to a Capricorn, I relate so much more to Aquarius or whatever. As you can see, your houses are in every sign. You have planets in every sign. Even if you don't have this IC is empty, it's in Sagittarius. But Sagittarius is represented by Jupiter. So you get a little bit of Sagittarius energy, but you only experience it when you really invest in Gemini stuff or MC stuff. So career, things like that. So sometimes, like, the things you experience are experienced indirectly or only in association with something else. Sorry, that's just like my little soapbox. Everybody can relate to a little bit of every sign, just like in real life without astrology. Whereas, like, nobody is only 17 traits and that's it. Everybody can pretty much relate to everything that anybody else has ever experienced. And that's the contradiction of human nature, which is that you can always feel a little bit of everything, even if it's not as at the forefront. Which is why it's so hard to characterize people, right? Which is what I love about astrology. It's all about kind of like the idea of, like, finding the contradictions and finding the themes and finding the harmonies. And sometimes there are things you just don't understand or can't answer, and that's fine. The same thing with people. So in this case, North Node, you can't even tell, like, where the little tabs go. It's just a little bottom tab. So it is in Pisces and is in DC. So, I mean, I already talked about the Pisces DC thing, which is that, like, you see yourself only in the bonds you build. So it is fitting that the bonds you most want to build are with people who have the empathy to see from the eyes of everybody else around them, which is exactly where your North Node is. So this whole entire chart is all about that specific theme, and this is actually a very well laid out chart. It's almost like I chose this on purpose. I didn't. So all the planets are very neatly set up to support this sort of like pro-social friendship win sort of thing. Yeah, so the North Node is like the lessons they need to learn. They need to learn the lessons of the 7th house, which is relationships, and the lesson of the sign of Pisces, which is to like walk the lives of everybody else. Which by the time you walk the lives of everybody else, I mentioned Pisces' ego death. By the time you can understand everybody else, do you even know who you are anymore? And apparently this person does not know who they are because they did not care about the introspective part. It's all important. You all need it. 8th house. 8th house is also about values. This is the higher octave of values. With the 2nd house, it's like creature comforts, you know? And the 8th house, it's like, all right, so you've had your first relationship and now you're like in the world. God, what do I actually value? When I like want to build bonds with other people, if I want to build a family, when I want to make my mark in this world, like, what do I want? And so it's part of the reason why Scorpio, which is the corresponding sign to the 8th house, gets the rep for being edgy, because they're all about questioning values. They're all about forming values, and oftentimes that can be a very critical thing. It can, especially because, I mean, for a lot of people, their foray into relationships, romantic, best friendship, can be really jading, right? And so that's the 8th house shtick, which is also why it's associated with taboo, because you're also kind of learning, oh, these are values. I don't know if I should be feeling those. Or like other people should not be feeling those. It can be very judgmental. In it is Mercury, which is interesting. because I feel like the Taurus Mercury, I didn't really care about it that much. But in the 8th house, it kind of makes it a little more interesting, right? Because I was thinking about it as kind of like just like, I don't know, being like stubborn in your ways, and so you don't want to see, you might not see others as openly as you should. And in the 8th house, it kind of gives the energy of like, maybe you're a judge, maybe part of it is that your rationale is influenced by the higher values you're developing about relationships, and like the idea of what should a friendship look like, what should a friendship make me feel based off of what I've experienced already, and having to be like, just because you've experienced it this way once doesn't mean that has to define your experiences in the future. So that's kind of like a little fun placement for the Mercury and Taurus. That's interesting context for this imaginary baby. Chiron is my favorite thing to talk about. It is the wounded healer, the healing that you help others through because you have experienced that hurt yourself. That is Chiron, the asteroid, which is in the 8th house and Aries. Also, the Chiron and Aries is also an interesting thing. But fitting, because we have all this Pisces energy of ego death, right? Which is that you have to learn the lesson of the Pisces, which is to be able to walk in everybody else's shoes. Aries, the first sign, the infant sign. Chiron and Aries. So, for some reason, you have felt hurt being your rawest, basest self, where you just were completely yourself, without thinking, without ego. You just are. And something about that was not received well. Maybe you were told you were too much, or you were too little, you were shut down, you were molded to be a different way. Something happened, but you weren't when you were being yourself without any thinking, without any filter, it was not well received. And that is something you identify in others, people who are not allowed to be themselves, and you want to help others be themselves, or to find themselves. Yeah, I love this little like North Node and Pisces, Chiron and Aries thing. Your life lesson is the Pisces lessons, and the hurt you felt that you want to heal in others is the Aries lesson. It's kind of like the old man versus infant thing, and how they're opposite parts of the life cycle and yet directly next to each other. Oh, I love that. What the cool. Great. So that's that. 9th house. 9th house is you develop your values, and I just kind of want to expand upon them. We talked about the toddler 3rd house. That's the opposite side of the same coin. It's all about pushing boundaries, but just in a more adult way. So, which is why Sagittarius energy. Oh, 9th house corresponds to Sagittarius. If you know anything about astrology, Sagittarius is all stereotyped to be like travel the world, hippie, philosophy, culture. And it's because they want to explore their minds, and they want to explore the minds of others, because they're developing and like starting to codify these like ideas they have, and they want to go, but what if that's not true? There must be more to it. The sun is in it. That's it. I don't care. Sorry, there's like sun and Taurus thing. There's like, like nothing here. But yeah, I mean, I guess the ego, there's a sense of like sun and Taurus are talking about kind of like, spring, senses, and then, but in the 9th house means that those Taurus themes we talked about, they get expressed most when you're doing 9th house things, which is expanding your values, exploring other people, other cultures, exploring the world, which fits with this idea of you only know yourself when you get to know others. Moving on, 10th house in Gemini, talked about that a little bit. And so there's another interesting part about astrology where the pattern goes cardinal, action, fixed, state of course, and what's it called? Mutual? Oh, that's not a word. I'll find it. Which is tinker. So the 9th house, expanding the mind. That's the tinker sort of idea. And now we're back at the cardinal, which is take action, start a trend, which is to build your own empire. This is the last quadrant, and then you die. And to kick off this last quadrant, the empire you build is a Gemini empire. And it's got that Jupiter thing going on, which is just generosity and expansion. Which, by the way, Jupiter corresponds to Sagittarius. This sort of mind expansion thing is very important, apparently, for your empire building. And yeah, so it's just very important to you about this like inner child and curiosity. And I move to the 11th house. 11th house corresponds with Aquarius, which we've talked about in detail. Another thing, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but 11th house is also the house of friendship. But it's also quite empty here, isn't it? So 11th house in Cancer. It's interesting. Cancer is the mommy sign. But it's a maternal sign. It's about, you could think mama bear as well, but it's this really like nurturing energy represented by the crab. So there is a sort of like guardedness in the same way that a kid might be guarded. I don't know if some kids, they're so vivacious, and then they reach an age of 4 or whatever, they start to get afraid of strangers. That's kind of what I think of Cancer, where like they start to learn to be a little bit afraid of others because they're getting out of their toddler self. I mean, they're in elementary school. It's like, oh, there's so many people, but they're still them inside. They still they still love their family. They still the kids where they start to get a little grief, but they still love to cuddle. That's Cancer energy to me. That's the friends you want or whatever. But yeah, 11th house energy in Cancer. You know what's funny about this? Cancer is represented by the moon. 11th house is represented by Aquarius. Guess where your moon is? In Aquarius. What the is this chart? Now, did I really choose this by random? That's crazy. You want to know why this is empty? Because it's so active here. You don't even worry about it. Whatever. You don't need to look at this. Just look at this. It's like basically equivalent. But yeah, this idea of like the community you build is really built on nurturing others. I think is, that's the conclusion I'm coming to. This idea of the community you build is built on nurturing others, mothering others, and giving people that sense of a safe place to go to. You want to give that kid that's scared at elementary school, but then they come home, they give their mom and dad a hug, and it's like, it's all better. That's what you want to be for others. And then at long last, we're at the 12th house. This is the ego death house. We walk through all the houses. We're at the 12th house. And so this is the weirdest house. I still don't quite understand it. It's often associated with, this is always the first thing I think of, it's associated with addiction and mental illness. But it's because like, after you've experienced all that, sometimes you want to drown out that which you have learned because it is so much to handle. It's very burdensome. This is the Mother Teresa house where you give yourself up in a life of service to others. It's associated with Pisces as well, which is a very also nurturing house, less in a motherly way, which is more personal, but in that, again, that kind of giving up yourself to help everybody else, which is in Leo. So it's kind of funny to have ego death in the most egotistical sign, right? Oh, by the way, 11th house contains the Mars. So just sort of like, I want to be the home for others. That's the community I want to build, where I and others become home for each other. And so, which means that Mars, when I was talking about the Leo Mars energy and taking action by being pizzazzy, that comes through most when you're building community and friendships, because it's all connected. And then 12th house in Leo, the ego death happens for you when you feel you've given yourself up most, when you feel like you've helped the world most. And it might be what makes you feel the most vulnerable is when you're all Leo-y. It's kind of like the more you express yourself, the more you wonder if it's still you're expressing. Or whatever. Yeah. Your later years are going to be very, very fulfilling. You'll find your childhood, it's probably feels like it's building up to something, but nothing really happens to you as a kid. Maybe not. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I'm not going to attempt to predict life events. That's not really my jam. But I get this sense of them observing others and being less interested in what they're feeling and what they're thinking and or their opinions on things or whatever. That's just less important to them as a child. And it's really when they get out into the world and start to build some independence, they really feel like they start seeing the world differently, where they start having opinions and thoughts about things. And not just because other people did, but because they really have a take, and they really are developing values that touch the core of who they are. That's not happening in their childhood. That's happening in their adulthood when the connections they have are the connections they built themselves. And they're going to build a lot of them. It's going to be very important for them to build a pretty wide community, I think. They are going to be very open-minded. They really want to befriend as many people as they can. And they might have reservations because especially in their childhood, if it's relatively inactive, you know, there's a contentedness in that, but it's not true contentedness. It's just you get comfortable in the way you grew up. But I think they understand that their inner world is less interesting than exploring other people's worlds. So yeah, they're going to be they're just going to be a lovely person to be around, a kind of person when you talk to them, you know they really care about you and they really are interested in you. And they're just able to build bonds with other people really, maybe not easily, but, well, probably easily, but the desire to build bonds with others is always there, and that's not something that's always present in everybody, but it's really present in them, and they really care about other people. That would be my TLDR for them.